So let's start with the first issue of the day, which is why trade, openness and national security go together. So in this op-ed, we have combined two op-eds that we have covered. One was regarding that why trade is actually beneficial for the nation. Secondly, or is it feasible for India to stop trading with China? Is it feasible for India to impose some kind of trade ban on Chinese goods? So both these op-eds were there, and they were saying almost the same things. So that is why we combined them into a single op-ed. So before we move forward, let me ask you the basic question: why do we actually trade? Why historically have we been trading? Well, to answer that empirically or mathematically, David Ricardo in 1800s came up with this theory called theory of comparative advantage. To explain this theory in detail, before we explain the theory in detail, let me start with my own example. So I am very comfortable with teaching economics. I am very comfortable with the subject of economics because I have a formal training in economics. Now I don't have a formal training in science, right? Suppose, let's see, I and Shweta ma'am are both aspirants, right? And she has an engineering background, so she is very well versed in science. I have an economics background, so I am very versed in economics. Now suppose if I read both of them, right, and it wastes a lot of my efforts because I have to first read economics and then I have to read science. So I have 12 hours in a day and I devote 6 hours in economics and 6 hours in science, right? On the other hand, Shweta ma'am devotes 6 hours in economics and 6 hours in science. So here I am not specializing in anything. I am reading both the subjects equally, even though my knowledge of science is limited. Now suppose if I focus 12 hours on economics and Shweta ma'am focuses 12 hours on science, right? And after that, I teach her the economics course and she explains me the science concepts in layman language. We both will benefit out of it. Why? Because ultimately we are saving our time. पहले हमको साइंस में 6 घंटा लगता था, अब आधे घंटे में श्वेता मैम हमको साइंस बता देंगी and I will explain economics to Shweta ma'am. Right? So ultimately both of us will benefit. How we are benefiting? We are benefiting through exchange. I am exchanging my knowledge with her, she is exchanging her knowledge with me. So this is how trade works in a more simple word. Let's now explain this concept, or let's now understand this concept through a mathematical example. Let's see, we have India and we have USA. Right? Now India, and let's assume that there are only two goods, and these goods are ice cream and cold drink. ठीक है? तो suppose in 1 hour India can produce 6 ice cream and 4 cold drink. And in 1 hour US can produce 10 ice cream and 5 cold drink. ठीक है? अब you must be wondering that US is efficient in producing both the things. अभी जो मैंने इससे पहले जो मैंने एग्जांपल दिया था, in that Shweta ma'am was expert in science and I was expert in economics. But now in this example, we are seeing that US is more efficient compared to India in producing both ice cream and cold drink. So in this kind of scenario, whether trade can happen, whether both the countries will benefit from the trade, yes, even in this concept, even when one country is efficient, in producing all the goods efficiently, even then also trade can happen between two countries and both these countries can benefit. This is what we call as the concept of comparative advantage. अब यहाँ पे benefit कैसे ले सकते हैं? Let's see an example. So suppose there are 2 hours, right? 2 hours में if there is no trade between India and USA, so then India will be able to produce 10 units, right? 6 ice cream and 4 cold drink, and USA will be able to produce 15 units, 10 units of ice cream and 5 units of cold drink. Now suppose India and USA decides, USA says to India, क्योंकि there is a concept of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means next best alternative, which means if I have to go, if I love both economics and history, but ultimately I believe that in economics I have a better career, so therefore I go for economics honors. So therefore the next best alternative for me is history. The opportunity cost of choosing economics honors is history honors, because I could have gone for the history honors. So in the same way, if US is producing cold drinks, then it means that in that 1 hour US could have produced 10 ice cream. ठीक है? So opportunity cost of US for producing cold drink is 2 ice cream. 1 घंटे में जितना वो कोल्ड ड्रिंक में स्पेंड कर रहा है, उस 1 घंटे को अगर वो आइसक्रीम में लगाता तो वो 2 आइसक्रीम बना सकता था. If we talk of India, if India is specializing in cold drink, then India will have to skip ice cream. तो उस 1 घंटे में इंडिया 1.5 आइसक्रीम बना सकता था. ठीक है? तो ट्रेड कैसे होता है? ट्रेड happens when a country has a lower opportunity cost. So if a country has a lower opportunity cost, it means that country is, or that country can more efficiently produce that good. In this case, it is India. India जो है अगर कोल्ड ड्रिंक बनाने में स्पेशलाइज करेगी तो हाउ मेनी कोल्ड ड्रिंक कैन इंडिया प्रोड्यूस? इंडिया विल बी एबल टू प्रोड्यूस 8 कोल्ड ड्रिंक. 1 घंटे में 4 बनाता है ना, तो 2 घंटे में कितना बनाएगा? 8 कोल्ड ड्रिंक्स. इफ US specializes in only making ice cream, then in 2 hours, how many ice cream will US be able to produce? 20 ice cream. And overall, when India and US specializes, let's see the advantage. Earlier, both these countries were able to produce only 25 units of ice cream and cold drink. Now that they are specializing in producing one product, they are producing 20 plus 8, 28 units. So when they will exchange with each other, when they will trade this with each other, both the countries will benefit. So both the countries will be in a better position post trade than they were before the trade. I hope you understand this example. So this comparative advantage theory actually proves that trade is actually beneficial for each and every country. It's not just कि US और अगर अफ्रीका की कोई कंट्री में ट्रेड हो रहा है तो सिर्फ US को बेनिफिट होगा, दोनों को बेनिफिट होगा, बिकॉज बोथ ऑफ देम विल बी स्पेशलाइजिंग इन प्रोड्यूसिंग समथिंग. सो historically what happened was that historically all the countries were trading with each other, but after this Ricardo's theory they started trading more, but this trade reduced during the interwar years. When we say interwar years, it is between 1919 till 1939. World War I and World War II के बीच में ट्रेड रुक गया था. And that is how, you know, there was rise of Hitler, there was rise of fascism, because the countries were not interconnected with each other. Actually, if countries are interconnected with each other, you know, they always have this thing कि अगर कल को war हो गया तो both of them will lose economically because they do trade with each other. But after that, in the World War II scenario, in the post World War II scenario, countries understood this fact that trade is a biggest antidote to the war. If trade will happen between the countries, they will be interconnected and there will be no fighting. So therefore, trade increased significantly in the post-World War II era, and in 1980s, when we adopted what we call as globalization, which is integration of the world economies. This concept of globalization came in 80s. After that, the trade increased in enormous ways in last 3 decades. But what we are seeing is in last 10 years, trade is again declining, and we will understand the factors later in this topic. Before that, let us first understand why exactly do countries go for protectionism. If trade is such a good thing, if trade is such an awesome thing, why do countries go for protectionism? Why do they impose tariff? Why do they impose duties on the imported goods? There are a number of arguments why they go for this. One is response to the import dumping. What do we mean by dumping? So suppose China provides subsidy to its producers. Now there are a lot of technical concepts which will be used in this lecture. That is why I am saying that all these words you will need to understand these. तो डंपिंग का क्या मतलब है कि चाइना ने क्या किया, चाइना ने अपने प्रोड्यूसर को सब्सिडी प्रोवाइड करी कि भाई ओके, इफ योर प्रोडक्शन कॉस्ट इज 100 रुपीज, 30 रुपीज सब्सिडी आई एम प्रोवाइडिंग टू यू, एंड आफ्टर दैट सब्सिडी चाइनीज प्रोडक्शन और चाइनाज प्रोडक्शन कॉस्ट इज चीपेस्ट इन द वर्ल्ड, राइट. विद दिस चीप कॉस्ट चाइना क्या करेगी, चाइना एक्सपोर्ट करेगी इंडिया को. अब इंडिया के जो मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, दे आर नॉट बीइंग प्रोवाइडेड बाय एनी सब्सिडी बाय द स्टेट. So therefore, India's manufacturers will be at disadvantage. So therefore, in order to counter this kind of subsidy-based export, countries क्या करती हैं? Countries anti-dumping duty लगाती हैं. So this anti-dumping duty is to provide level playing field. So suppose if 30% is subsidy provided by the state, so India क्या करेगी? India 30% anti-dumping duty लगा देगी, so that the production cost of Indian good and the Chinese good would be equal. Because अगर वो नहीं लगाएंगे anti-dumping duty, so what will happen? Then India's whole domestic market will be replaced by the imported goods from China. So first reason is response to the import dumping. Second is response to the trade gap or deficit. So if there is a trade deficit between countries, for example, India and China has a trade deficit of $57 billion. So when there is trade deficit, you are actually losing your foreign currency, and this is not good for you because it widens your current account deficit. So therefore, countries usually impose tariff on the imported goods in order to reduce the trade deficit. Third is to protect employment. Again, अगर इंडिया की सारी डोमेस्टिक मार्केट्स को बाहर के गुड्स रिप्लेस कर देंगे, there will be lack of jobs in India because Indian industries will not be creating anything because there is no demand for their goods. So naturally, there will be less employment creation. This is not what government actually wants. Next is to protect the infant sectors. So infant sectors are those sectors जिन्होंने अभी start किया production. For example, suppose India starts producing API. Right, now there is talk, right, that India should produce its own API because ultimately India is too much dependent on China, and China can use that to its benefit whenever there is tension with India on the border. So to produce API, you will need to, the government will need to give some kind of protection for few years, because right now they are not in the position where they can compete with the foreign APIs. Right, because the cost of production is high and all these things are there, technology is there, plus it requires a lot of investment. So all these things, for few years till Indian API sector reaches to a level where they can compete with the foreign goods or with the, foreign companies, till that time the state will have to give such certain kind of protection. Next is protect the key strategic industries. For example, if we talk of in India, you have railways, you have atomic energy, certain sectors of fertilizers, they are not open. Why? Because government wants to protect them. Government does not want its dependence on other countries. Because suppose India's relation with that country deteriorates in future, then if that country stops exporting us that good, then our national security could be hurted very badly. Next is to raise extra revenue. Well, if you impose tariff, if you impose customs, you get it's kind of extra tax for the government, right? And so this exactly is the reason why countries go for protectionism. Now, what are the arguments against trade barriers? So, first of all, if you impose these barriers, if you impose protectionism, there are a number of things. One is, and the most important is, market distortion. Therefore, we need to understand this thing, that in a free market economy, let's the market decide कि वो किस चीज को produce करना चाहती है. Let's take an example of India. India till 1980s we protected our automobile sector, and that is why we had these inefficient models of Ambassador which was produced by Hindustan Motors, and that was really a pathetic car. It used to give average of 6, and it was really a bad car, right? 1990s, India started liberalizing its automobile sector, and it allowed Ford and Hyundais and Hondas to enter the Indian market, and therefore the Indian manufacturers, Tatas, Mahindras, they also faced competition, and since they faced competition, they started innovation, and because they started innovation, now you have Mahindra and Tata competing with the best countries of the world. I mean, I've seen Mahindra cars in Southeast Asia, even in Europe. In Europe, you have Mahindra cars. So it means that, if you protect your industries, then ultimately you are creating inefficiency, because you are protecting those inefficient industries. Next is higher price for consumer. Now, ultimately, if something could be imported at a cheaper price from abroad, and there is no point for us to not import them, because ultimately it will be the consumer who will be suffering, who will be paying high price for that particular commodity. Third is it increases income inequality. How does it increase income inequality? Because ultimately, when you are going for protectionism or trade barrier, who are you protecting? You are protecting the small section of producers. On the other hand, you are hurting whom? You are hurting 99% of the section, which is consumer. So ultimately, with this protectionism, it is these producers, small producers. When this license Raj was there in India, who were the beneficiaries? All these crony people, 8-10 people, right? So 99% were consumers. These consumers are being hurted, and their income is improving because now they don't have to face any competition, and since they don't have to face any competition, they can charge any price they want. Plus, even if they want, they can even not innovate because they don't have to face any competition. Next is, it is also high cost for exporters. Why? Because exporters की हम बात करेंगे, there are a lot of things in India which are exported by India, but a significant amount of raw material comes from abroad. The biggest example is medicine. We are called as the pharmaceutical factory of the world, capital of the world. But if we don't get the raw material imported from abroad, natural si baat hai, we will not be able to export them, right? So even for exporting, you need certain raw materials. And last is risk of retaliation, which is, if you do that, the other country will do the same thing, and in that way nobody will benefit. So why exactly is global trade witnessing a slowdown? Why is protectionism a order of the day? Well, there are a number of factors. The biggest factor is popular backlash. Now, the old students already know about this because I have explained this many times in the last series of the lectures. So, see, what happened was that in the 1980s, a new kind of model emerged in the world, and this model was neoliberalism. When we say neo, it means new kind of liberalism. What is the old liberalism? Old liberalism is about Adam Smith's theory of invisible hand, laissez-faire, that a market which is governed the least is the best market. You have to leave everything to market. State should have no interference in economic matters. So this was the theory of laissez-faire, which was prevalent in early 19th century. But then in the in the Great Depression era, after the Great Depression era, which is 1929, the world realized that liberalism or complete free market is actually not good, because you need some kind of state intervention whenever there is crisis. So therefore, a new concept of welfare state emerged. And this welfare state was based on Keynesian model. You don't need to know more about that. But welfare state is where the state is playing an active role in the distribution purposes, where state actually provides free healthcare, free education. It's more about a welfare orientation, right? 1980s, new concept developed, and there were two leaders who were propagating this concept, and one was Reagan, another was Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, the female Prime Minister of Britain. Both these were biggest proponents of free market, and they believed in complete deregulation, privatization, liberalization, globalization, and therefore they developed this concept of neoliberalism. Under the neoliberalism, the states were told that you need to privatize everything. You need to don't need to look for you don't need to interfere in the economy. There should be no regulation. There should be complete deregulation. So this concept of neoliberalism, what it did was that it led to a crisis of 2008 economic recession. And this recession, if I explain about that, it will take another one lecture. But the main reason why this happened was because there was complete deregulation. You left everything to the market, and therefore market took advantage of this. So therefore, because of this 2008 recession, countries throughout the world realized that this model of globalization, where the countries trade with each other, etc., etc., it is actually only benefiting the capitalist class, and it's actually against the working class. So therefore, you had people in US, you had this movement of we the 99%. Because हुआ क्या कि जो working class jobs थी US में, these jobs went to India, China, Philippines, Vietnam. It's only the capitalists in China, in US, which benefited from this neoliberalism model. So therefore, there was huge backlash throughout the world that this model of globalization is actually this model of globalization based on free trade. It is actually increasing income inequality in different countries because it is only benefiting the capitalists. So therefore, it led to the emergence of right-wing hysterical, or what we call as extreme right-wing leaders like Trump, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, like Erdogan in Turkey, like Viktor Orban, and to some extent even Modi, because Modi's idea of Make in India and economic nationalism is also it's antithesis to the trade. So all these leaders, they came up with the promise that we will be working for the benefit of the working class, and therefore they imposed a lot of restrictions on trade. When Trump came to power, he came up with the promise, right? Make America great again. Buy American, hire American. That was his promise, right? Bolsonaro and Erdogan, all of them, promised similar kind of things. So all these things played an important role in reducing the sentiments of the world towards anti-trade. And therefore you had, even in UK you have Brexit and all these activities. And recent example of this which has reduced trade in the world is US-China trade war. US has imposed sanctions on Chinese imports, and China has retaliated in the same way. So we have this scenario where economic nationalism is on the rise, and therefore because economic nationalism is on the rise, trade is suffering. Now let's come to the second main issue of this op-ed, which is it feasible for India to stop trade or stop trading with China? Is it feasible for India to impose complete embargo of that? So before we go into that, let us understand how much trade is there between India and China. So total trade is $75 billion, out of which 57 billion is, imported by India and 18 billion is exported to China. Right. Also, why protectionism cannot be an answer as a policy for India? Because a lot of hawks have been saying that we should boycott everything, and recently government has boycotted some of the apps, and except TikTok and Camscan, I have never even heard about these apps. So they have banned these apps. Banning app is not an issue, but if you will ban imports from China in more important sectors, that is not feasible at this moment. It could be feasible after 5 years when we have a manufacturing base for that. For example, as I have told you, majority of the API which is used to manufacture medicine is from China. We are dependent on electronics on China, because if we see the statistics, we see that around 45% of total electronics that India uses comes from China. Then we are also dependent almost 40% of fertilizers, raw material, automobile parts, 90% of mobile phone parts. All of these comes from China. Right? So if we need to grow at 8% that we are promising, that we have been promised, then we'll need, at least for next few years, we need to import material from China. And in this time period, we can develop our own manufacturing capabilities. After that, that's a no issue. But right now, we are too much dependent on China. Secondly, India's export sector is also dependent on China. What do we really export? We export pharmaceuticals. We export a lot of MSME goods. In सबका काफी हद तक raw material, machinery is imported from China. Right? If China stops giving us API, I have told you in the last lecture also that lakhs of people will die in India, because even we cannot make a single tablet of paracetamol if we don't get API from China, because we don't have a indigenous manufacturing base for this. Right? So in order to export also, you require some kind of trade with China. Next is, China is not dependent on India. I mean, there are people who are saying that if we stop buying from China, China's economy will be crumbled, China's economy will be shattered. But at least the statistics doesn't show this thing, because according to statistics, China का जो total export है to India, it's only 2% of its total export. Only 2%. Because China exports a lot to US, to Japan, to other countries. So even if we stop buying from China, it will hardly have an impact on the Chinese economy. It will destroy India's economy completely. That is a fact. So what exactly is the way forward? What should we go? Well, we should think somewhere in between. Even if a question comes in the UPSC exam, you should always search for a middle ground. Even in your answers also, your answers should never be extreme. It should be somewhere in the middle ground. So when we talk of middle ground, we should see that in the short run, we should first look for alternatives, whether if any other countries is also producing the same thing. If they are producing the same thing, then we can look for Vietnam and Japan or South Korea, etc., etc. So we should look for alternatives. If we don't have alternatives, we should continue to import with China, but the import should be only restricted to strategic goods. जो non-essential items हैं, and for which India has a decent amount of domestic base, these imports could be completely stopped. Okay? So non-essential imports could be completely stopped, and only the essential imports should be continued to be imported. But in the meanwhile, India will have to focus on improving its own manufacturing capabilities. Because if we want to replace or end the Chinese imports, we'll have to develop our manufacturing capabilities. For this, government has recently announced that it will develop drug parks, in which they will be a base for API and all. So this kind of parks and all industry parks need to be created, so that in next 5 years, let's talk of 2025, in next 5 years we will have no dependence on China and we will be self-sufficient, we will be self-reliant, at least when we talk of trade with China is concerned. So this should be India's strategy. Let's now move to the next issue, which is tale of two economies. So in this we are because China, COVID, China. These are the two things which are dominating the news and the op-eds. So it's not our fault. We only bring you what is there, what is covered in the newspaper. We do not really create news from our side. So tale of two economies, it actually compares India and China. How Chinese grew so faster compared to India. Because if we talk of 1990 if we talk, China's per capita income was somewhere $318. India's per capita income was $368. So in 1990, India's per capita income is more than that of China. But in 2020, China's per capita income is $10,000. India is $2,000. So China's per capita income is 5 times that of India. What happened in these 30 years? Why the countries who started their journey together had shown such a wide disparity in last 30 years? Well, to understand that, we will first need to understand the policies of China. Why did China grow rapidly and why couldn't India grow so rapidly? The first reason is China's focus on infrastructure. So even during the communist years when Mao was there and when other people were there, China invested heavily on infrastructure. For example, totally it was mandated that country like China should invest 6.5% of the total GDP on infrastructure. And same was there for India. This was prescribed by the World Bank. But in last 50 years, China had invested 9% of its total GDP on infra development. In comparison, India only invested 3% of its total GDP in infra investment. What are the benefits of infra investment? Well, the biggest benefit of infra investment is that it actually has a lot of backward and forward linkages. For example, if you make road, you require cement, you require steel, you require iron, you require aluminium, so many things you require. So it indirectly gives a boost to many different industries. Secondly, it has a potential to create a lot of jobs, because to create these roads and these pulls and these highways, you need to, a lot of workers have to work on that, right? So ultimately what China did was, because it did focus on infrastructure, though fayde hue, one, it created employment for its people, and then these people, since they had the money, they were able to buy industrial goods. And this is how industry got a ready-made market. Right, one thing is that. Secondly, infrastructure ne kya kiya? Infrastructure made it easier for the foreign companies to settle their base or to start their base in China. Because when you have good roads, when you have good connectivity, when you have 24/7 electricity, all these things matter. All these things matter for any person who is looking to establish an industry in certain area. Why don't we have industries in Bihar or Orissa? Because the infrastructure is weak there. Why do we have industries in Maharashtra and Gujarat? Because the infrastructure is good there, right? So all these things made it possible for China to grow. Second reason is its policy since independence and how it is different from India. See, what happened was, and that was even from the Mao era, China from beginning focused on basic education. And it's not just China. All countries of Southeast Asia and East Asia focused on basic education and skilled education, right? On the other hand, if we talk of India, we focus more on higher education. All these IITs, IIMs and AIIMS. So for manufacturing, you require basic skilled people at mass level. Right? Which was existent in China when China opened up its economy. It was there in China. In India's case, since we focused on higher education, so therefore when India opened up its economy in 1991, we had a pool of highly educated software professionals, etc. But since we ignored basic education, हमारे पास basic skilled people नहीं थे. China में nobody dies of hunger. Why? Because everybody has been provided with some kind of training. And this training meant that he can build a Ganesha or your Diwali lights and he can sustain himself. India के case में there was hardly any attention given to vocational education. So therefore, in 1990, India became more of a service sector oriented economy. But the problem with the service sector oriented economy was that only 2 million people are employed in the IT sector. So the growth process in India could not benefit majority of Indian section. Right? In China, because their growth process was led by labor intensive manufacturing exports. So therefore, the growth process in China, actually touched a lot of sections of the people because it was based on creating jobs. A lot of industrial units, they were set up in different parts of China. Why? Because in 1990s, earlier these factories were in South Korea, in Singapore, in Japan. But by 1990s, the labor in China was much cheaper compared to labor in Singapore or South Korea. Therefore, many of these industries shifted to China. And because China had a pool of basic skilled people, therefore they could sustain themselves. Third is the business friendly policies. Now this could be said that in China there were no labor laws, rigid labor laws like India. India case we had these labor laws which inhibited companies from growing big, because if they grew big they have to follow all these regulations. And you all know that Industrial Disputes Act says that if you have 100 workers or more, you need to, if you fire any of them, you need to take government's permission. Plus you have to fulfill so many of the compliances. So all these made manufacturing sector in India a small entity. Compared to that, China, there was complete freedom, given to the entrepreneurs, and therefore they could succeed. Fourthly is the SEZ policy. Now SEZ policy, if we say, SEZ policy of China is different from India. What is SEZ? Special Economic Zones. India में क्या हुआ? And these are the areas, these are the enclaves where the laws are very liberal, and the industries which are within the SEZ, they need to only produce for export. They cannot sell any produce to the domestic market, and they have been given freedom from all kinds of taxes, etc., etc. So these SEZs were created both in India and China. But in case of India, SEZs were very small. Plus infrastructure outside the SEZ was very poor. So therefore, Noida में अगर SEZ है, तो Noida से अगर उसको export करना है, you require good transport, you require good logistic support, you require good roads. But if that is poor, natural सी बात है, the SEZs, the SEZs effectiveness will be limited. Plus SEZ was very small, right? Third, you had this bureaucracy who were managing these SEZ. They were also poor, they were also inefficient. In China, first of all, the SEZs were very large. They were few, but they were very large, right? Secondly, in China, they created what we call as the merit-based system, under which the control of SEZ was given to a official of Communist Party. And his rise in the party structure was based on how well he can manage that SEZ. So once that incentive was given to the local level Communist Party officials, naturally they run these SEZ as a chief executive, as a corporate style chief executive. And that is how SEZs in China created a lot of jobs. It made China as a export capital of the world. Next was China's education policy. So China में क्या होता है कि in China the Chinese government, they provide some kind of, or they provide 100% scholarship to some Chinese people who want to do research in the field of, you know, highly technological sectors, STEM, for example, STEM, science, technology and mathematics. So these students, they are sent by China to best universities of the world on full scholarship, but with a clause, with a promise. And this promise is that you need to come back to China and help in the R&D infrastructure of China once you complete your research. So through this, there's a lot of reverse brain drain in China. A lot of people who have been doing research, pioneering research throughout the world, they come back to China and they help in the R&D. And that is how China is a pioneer or world leader in new kind of technology. On the case of India, we have this brain drain. The good people from India, they go abroad after completing their degrees from IITs and IIMs. And last is the less water intensive agriculture. China का, I have already discussed that in the earlier, कि China का per capita जो land availability है, it is less than India, half of India. But China's agriculture is twice as productive than India. Why? Because they use a significant kind of technology in agriculture. They use less water intensive agriculture, and India, because we use a lot of water intensive agriculture, the fertility of land has declined. So all these factors have played a very important role in ensuring that China could actually grow much faster than India.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil's Daily.